brightening skies, a few showers pushing their way through, and cooler weather with the blustery conditions. Now, the worst of the winds will ease through Saturday evening, pulling out into the North Sea. With that ridge of high pressure building in, then we'll see the skies clearing, the winds easing down, and a touch of frost is likely as we start the day on Sunday. Temperatures in rural spots getting close to freezing. But you can already see out towards the west this next system starting to push its way in. That'll start to increase the cloud across the sky, so a hazy sunny start, but quickly turning quite cloudy. And I think as we get into the afternoon on Sunday, we will see that wet weather pushing in across Scotland. Notice it bumping into the colder air, could give some hill snow as well. And later on, we will see those winds turn very strong once again. Warnings remain in place for Sunday. We'll keep you updated with the latest. Bye-bye.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Good evening, I'm Mark Steyn, live on your telly and live on your wireless at the same time. Incredibly enough, tonight the Sue Gray report is... Oh wait, no, it's not. So much for that. Plus, in Britain, Canada, Europe and elsewhere, the pushback against mandates is gathering steam, and don't you like it? When someone says to you, I have never been loved like this before. And it's not just because you're wearing your Incredible Hulk rubber suit. All that, plus the indispensable part of the show, your questions and comments. Let me know what's on your mind by email, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at gbnews. But first, as always on GB News, the news with Karen Roberts.
I'm Karen Roberts in the GB newsroom. The Met Police are under fire this evening after intervening in the publication of Sue Gray's report into alleged lockdown breaches in Downing Street. Scotland Yard have asked that minimal reference be made to events at Downing Street in order to avoid any prejudice to their inquiries. But they have confirmed that the investigation has not been escalated to a criminal one. Critics say a swift publication of Miss Gray's report in full is in the public interest. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says it's becoming too much of a distraction.
Got a criminal investigation into the behaviour of the Prime Minister and what went on in Downing Street. There are bound to be process issues along the way, but this is caused by one thing, and that's the behaviour of the Prime Minister.
The Russian president has told his French counterpart that Moscow's main security concerns over Ukraine have not been addressed. Vladimir Putin held talks with Emmanuel Macron earlier, following the US and NATO's response to Russia's proposals. They include a request that Ukraine will never be allowed to join the group. It's as the Kremlin sent its strongest signal yet that it's willing to engage with the US and reiterated it doesn't want a war. Speaking earlier, US Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin says there is no reason the situation has to devolve into conflict.
Conflict is not inevitable. There is still time and space for diplomacy. The United States, in lockstep with our allies and partners, has offered Russia a path away from crisis and toward greater security.
Meanwhile, British companies are being warned to strengthen their digital defences following malicious online attacks in Ukraine. The National Cybersecurity Centre says the incidents bear the hallmarks of Russian activity. No current threats have been identified in the UK, but guidance has been updated to ensure businesses stay ahead of potential threats. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg warned that the West must be prepared for different forms of Russian aggression against Ukraine. A senior civil servant has apologised for misleading MPs over the evacuation of animals in Afghanistan. Sir Philip Barton told the Foreign Affairs Committee that the Prime Minister's special representative for Afghanistan, Nigel Casey, had not been told about the intervention. However, recent emails show Mr Casey did ask Number 10 for guidance on what they wanted to be done with the Nowzad animal charity. The government's pledging to officially recognise British Sign Language after a new bill had an unopposed second reading in the Commons. It's hoped that the legislation will improve access for deaf people and promote signing during public announcements. Well, that's it from me. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Mark Steyn.
That Canadian anti-mandate truck convoy we discussed yesterday is really the most inspiring story around the world at the moment. For 2 years, Western governments, in league with Chairman Xi and his crazy Wuhan bat fanciers, have trashed the lives and livelihoods of their citizens. Certain unhip, unfashionable types have kept things going as best they can, like truck drivers, without whom the shops would be even emptier than they are. And what thanks do they get 2 years in? Oh, by the way, we're going to screw you over too. That truck convoy is now closing in on Ottawa. They passed Wawa, Ontario, which is the last gas station for 100 miles, and then rolled on down to Sault Ste. Marie, where they got a huge welcome, and then past Elliott Lake, where my parents eloped to many years ago, as it happens. Justin Trudeau and his entire cabinet have come down with the dreaded panty waist variant and are self-isolating in the basement. You know, a lot of people have been protesting these mandates. NHS staff here about to be laid off, Australian shopkeepers. But I think it was a big mistake to target a demographic who have the biggest and most visible mode of transport. And there is now talk about organising a similar truck convoy on the continent. Are there any more risibly brain-dead slogans than follow the science? The science negates the case for vaccine mandates. The science says the vaccine's effectiveness dwindles in a few weeks to about 20%, and repeated booster shots have less and less impact on the virus, but more and more on your immune system. Israel went to the 4th shot, and it's a total bust. Every gefilte fish and matzo ball is dripping Omicron. The science says the vaccines don't prevent you getting the virus or prevent you giving the virus. The science says there's no need for children to get it, and men under 30, 35, 40, to put it at its mildest, need to think very carefully about getting it. The science says that effective vaccines are difficult. They historically take years, sometimes decades to develop. So it's no surprise that a 9-month miracle cure turns out to be underperforming dramatically. COVID, in one form or another, is here to stay. So the choice is, do you want to live with it, or do you want to put life on hold and lock down forever? Whatever consensus there once was is fraying day by day. We're going to have more on this later in the show from someone who is taking Her Majesty's government to court over these so-called vaccine mandates. We could use some energy in the executive right now about going full steam ahead to a post-lockdown world and putting 2020 and 2021 behind us. But the Prime Minister is stymied by Categate. Were you one of those waiting with breath more bated than you ever thought your breath could ever get, bait-wise? For the drum roll, please, for the Sue Gray report. Waterstone says that advance orders for the Sue Gray report now top Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Unfortunately, as we mentioned the other night, the Sue Gray report was a-coming, but it seems to have a come and a gone. The Metropolitan Police have asked for significant redactions to 8 events they say they're investigating. They're going to be investigating those 8 events for several months through at least 3 or 4 post-Omicron variants. So whatever is released, maybe this weekend or maybe next week, is going to be extremely tame. If you were expecting 50 Shades of Sue Gray, you are in for a colossal disappointment. As you know, on this show we've been increasingly puzzled by the bizarre behaviour of Cressida Dick's somewhat mercurial constabulary, starting with her announcement of this investigation. It's most unusual for the Commissioner to announce an investigation, and even odder to do it at the London Assembly. And it's still not clear what she's investigating. Although earlier today, the Met have stated that this is not yet a criminal investigation. So exactly what kind of investigation these policemen are investigating is a little vague too. As we've also discussed, not a single one of the parties reported to date, Cake Gate, Suitcase Gate, Funeral Gate, Garden Gate, is prosecutable. All are well past what Americans call the statute of limitations, yet Dame Cressida claims to have 8 events, none of which have made the newspapers, that she's investigating. Now she has asked for these redactions in order to, quote, avoid any prejudice to our investigation. And her statements refer to, quote, evidence of behaviour that is potentially a criminal offence. What do you reckon is going on here? A month's of investigation just going to bore Categate into the ground? You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet me at GBNews. I'm puzzled. I'm puzzled as to what this investigation is or why it exists. So I'm glad to welcome back Parm Sandhu, who's former Chief Superintendent at Scotland Yard, to explain some of this to us. Parm, let me just start with this. This was the statement put out by the Met earlier today. And I was thinking about this. Is it usual for there to be no investigative detective for you to contact at the bottom of a statement such as this? I don't claim to follow every police investigation, but I know that with Ronnie Biggs, for example, it was Slipper of the Yard who was in charge. And so when you knew at Scotland Yard, if you were picking up the payphone, you knew to call Slipper of the Yard because he was the guy dealing with it. Is it unusual not to actually know who is investigating this?
Mark, there have been so many unusual events surrounding this alleged parties and the investigation by the Met. Is it going to happen? Isn't it going to happen? And when you start talking about Slipper of the Yard, they have actually announced who's in charge of this investigation, and they have appointed a Deputy Assistant Commissioner. Now, I'm as confused as you are as to why this would have any impact on the Sue Gray report being published, because, as you say, they've said that they're not pursuing any other criminal matters. So what this investigation is about is, it's almost like parking tickets. The people who are found guilty will get a fixed penalty notice, which is a fine. So now we're targeting lots and lots of resources, lots of people, and it's not just policemen, by the way, Mark. There are some police women within the Metropolitan Police, because you mentioned policemen.
Hey there. It's a fair cop.
So we don't really know what's being investigated and why. And you do mention the time limits as well. It is supposed to be done within the 6 months. So the events that they're looking at, the possible 8 events, have to be within the last 6 months, otherwise it's not really doable. So, you know, I'm in the dark just as much as you are on this aspect, but I can try and explain the questions if you want to ask them.
No, well, let me just, before we get on to some of these specific questions, which I am genuinely interested by, because if you can just announce an investigation into somebody, if Dame Cressida announces an investigation into you and doesn't say what it's for or what the potential crime is, it just leaves this big cloud sitting over you for months on end, which I don't think is entirely appropriate. So that puzzles me too, and I wonder how usual that is.
Well, in relation to announcing investigations, in my 30 years, and it's only 30 years, I've never actually seen the Commissioner announce an investigation like this before. And when you start talking about investigations, and unfortunately I have got that T-shirt and I was investigated, it can take 18 months, it can take 2 years. So where we're talking about the Sue Gray report being imminent and people want it now because they want those answers now and they want that clarity now, we could be waiting 6 months, 12 months, 18 months before the Met finish their investigations.
Yeah, which is pushing up against any general election or whatever. It's an interesting thing in terms of political timing too. But let me ask you about this term. They don't want these events discussed in Sue Gray's report because it could be prejudicial to the investigation. Prejudicial is a word that has different meanings at different stages of a legal process. Usually people are concerned that something is prejudicial because it can impact the jury, but there's not going to be a jury trial for anything here. So what actually does it mean to say that something is prejudicial to an investigation?
Well, when I first heard that, it suggested to me that you've mentioned the 8 events. So if it is 8 events, that they were looking at something more, that there was another criminal offence that may be alleged or may have occurred. So that they were looking at something else which could end up in a criminal court with a jury who may have read about it in the Sue Gray report. That would be prejudicial. But this afternoon or this evening, they've come out and they've said no. Go on.
Yep, carry on, Palm. That was very interesting. Yeah, carry on. That was interesting. That was very interesting.
So this evening, the reports are that they've come back and said, no, they're not looking at any other criminal alleged offences or incidents, and they are only looking at the allegations around Partygate. So there is no prejudice. I cannot see how a jury could be prejudiced, how this investigation could be influenced in any way. So that's what I was going to say.
No, it's puzzling to me that obviously this isn't a judge who has ruled that something is prejudicial. Is Sue Gray entitled just to say, well, thank you very much, Dame Cressida, but I'm going to release the whole thing anyway? Is she free to disregard the Met's quote advice on this?
Well, Sue Gray has conducted an internal investigation, a fact-finding investigation, and it's along the rules that govern civil servants. So she is entitled to do with that whatever she wishes. Now, the only way that the Met could prevent that is by using legislation. I can't see any legislation that would apply to this particular circumstance because it's not going to go to a court. It's not going to go in front of a jury. So unless I fell asleep and there was a law brought in overnight, which I'm looking at the events of the last week, things are changing so quickly, it may have done. There is no law preventing publication of this, and it appears to be guidance or advice. And as you say, the telephone number and the name isn't on the bottom of that sheet of paper, so you can't ring Slipper of the Yard and say, can I publish it, and why not?
Yeah, so in fact, anyone who receives a copy of the full report is free to put it on their Twitter feed or whatever they want to do with it.
Unless somebody brings out an injunction or prevents them from doing it, or says it's, either a secret document or it's a protected document, yes, absolutely.
Now, you've said this is very unusual. They seem to be determined to go ahead then with an investigation that will take months, and you've suggested it could be 1.5 or 2 years. Looking into, and you've said these are, these are breaches of lockdown regulations, which are very easy to establish. Either there was a party or there wasn't a party. There's photographic evidence that there's, huge numbers of people in the Downing Street garden. There's probably photographs of the cake and all the rest of it. These are not difficult things to establish in one of the most surveilled properties in Her Majesty's dominions, which is her Prime Minister's residence. So why would it take 2 years to find out whether there's been a breach of lockdown?
If you're looking at the 8 incidents, then what you have to do is you have to look at those 8 dates. You have to look at the videos, the CCTV for those 8 dates. You then have to look at your swipe card access and who was there and who wasn't there, what time they came in and what time they didn't. Then every single person at those alleged parties would then have to be interviewed. Now, if you've got 8 different dates, that means you've got 8 different lots of people. And if you've got anybody who's been at all 8, you would have to gather the evidence first, then get that individual in and then say, right, here are the 8 dates. On this day, you came in at this time, you left at this time, you were seen staggering out. Have you got something to say about it? And at the same time, you'd have to caution that person. You'd have to tell them that they're not under arrest, and you would have to give them access to legal advice. So each one of those interviews could take, it could be a page or it could be 10 pages worth, because you're not looking at one 24-hour period. You're looking at 8 different dates. So if you're starting from 0 and you've got to interview, I mean, some of those alleged parties had 30-odd people in each one of them. That's a lot of statements. That's a lot of police officers, and that's a lot of time.
Well, I don't know. I'm not sure whether it's that much time, Palm, because if we're thinking about this is supposed to be the equivalent of what ordinary people did throughout 2020 when most of these events took place, which is why you can't take them into a magistrate's court now. But this is the equivalent of, somebody sitting for half an hour too long on a park bench and a constable coming along and saying, I've seen you've been sitting here for far too long, you've got to move away or you're going to be fined. This is the 4th time you've been out of your house today, so you go inside now or you're going to be... All those things were basically done in 20 minutes. The guy we had on the other night who had a party in Coles Hill, North Warwickshire, with 3 of his friends to celebrate his birthday in his garden. The police came round within an hour and announced they were fining him, and it was all wrapped up within an hour and a half. So why, if these are the crimes that he's committed, Boris Johnson, why suddenly, just because it's retrospective, does it all have to be done in a far more laborious way?
Well, that's where the politics comes into it, because there are going to be so many senior officers who are signing this off. And can you imagine, you're the lowly PC who has to give that ticket to Boris? Would you want to be in that person's shoes? There are so many people who are going to sign that off before it's actually issued.
OK, let me throw the big question at you, which I think, millions of people around these islands are thinking right now. We've just heard that only 6% of offences I'm not sure whether it's England and Wales or the entirety of the realm, actually come to a charge. 6%. These figures have just come out in the last couple of days. Given that, why is the Metropolitan Police investigating what it says is not at the moment a criminal investigation, rather than criminally investigating some of these 94% of offences that never come to a charge?
And that's the big question, and that's where the public interest comes in. And I do think that this has been driven by the public showing such an extreme interest, because so many people did suffer during that 2 years, and they did get tickets. So they are thinking it's one rule for us and it's one rule for them. So I think it's been driven by public interest. But at the same time, it's political, it's in the newspapers, everybody's interested. And it is wrong that so much resources, so much money is going to go into this when we haven't, in this country, we haven't got the right resources to investigate child abuse, rapes, murders properly, and yet we are going to have a huge team looking at these 8 dates and really putting some real police resource into it.
No, that's right. There's grooming gangs, there's stabbings, but there's all the money for an 18-month investigation into Cake Gate, Suitcase Gate, Funeral Gate and Garden Gate. Palm, it's always good to see you, and this thing gets, this behaviour by the Met gets odder and odder to me, so I'm sure with more developments we'll want to have you back on, because you explain this more clearly than anybody. Thank you very much, Palm. Great to see you. Let me know what you think, folks. You can email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and you can ask me anything for Stump the Steyn. That's at GBNews for you Twitter aficionados. It's not just truckers against mandates, but also healthcare workers. One of them is up next. And man cannot live on Cake Gate and COVID alone, so we have a candy girl to pour a little sugar on you coming up. I don't know what that means, but I'm game. Keep it on GB News. We'll be right back.
On Mark Dolan tonight, in The Big Question, should we have face masks forever? We'll hear from both sides on that one. My Mark Meets guest is the legendary former Daily Telegraph cartoonist Bob Moran, whose anti-lockdown artworks have won him fans and critics in equal measure. In my Big Opinion monologue, why is freedom now a 4-letter word? Mark Dolan tonight. Big opinions, big guests, big stories. See you at 9.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Hey, let's get straight to your comments. I'm not sure this is related to anything I was talking about, but Dawn says, didn't Nostradamus predict a third world war this year? I do hope so, Dawn. Nuke me now, baby. I'd prefer that to another year of lockdown, honestly. John says via GB Views, as we tend to follow US trends in the UK, is it any surprise we now have our own mini version of the Durham report, courtesy of Sue Gray? In case you don't know, John Durham, actually we're not quite as bad as the United States, because John Durham's investigation is an investigation into the phony baloney Russia investigation. So America is a much more sophisticated jurisdiction than the United Kingdom, because they don't just have investigations, but they then have investigations into the investigation. So we will have Cressida Dick's investigation, and then if we're going to go really American, maybe we should just fly in one of these big shot Americans to investigate the Cressida Dick investigation. But anyway, the Durham report, everybody's all very excited about it. He's looking back to the phony baloney investigation into the 2016 presidential election. And Republicans are very excited that John Durham is investigating the Democrats' shenanigans in the 2016 election, even as Democrats have moved on to stealing the 2024 election. That's how it works. We're not yet at that level of sophistication. But if Sue Gray is watching this, issue the report. You heard what Palm was saying. There's nothing to prevent you redacting it. Certainly not for something that, as Cressida Dick has just said, is not a criminal investigation. So what are you redacting it for if it's not going to be part of a criminal investigation? Just to spare the blushes of a few embarrassed persons? Put it all out. Issue it tonight. Issue it tonight. We'll come back and cover it on Monday. Margaret says, Mark, you are hilarious and completely smart. It's not meant to be funny. It's the whole country, the whole joint sliding off a cliff. It's deadly serious. Margaret says, you made me literally laugh out loud. Partygate and Gate, one of the best parts of GB. It's not funny, Margaret. Stop laughing. It's Armageddon Gate. We're going off the cliff. That's what it's about. Steve said this circus of an investigation is, quote, prejudicial to the Johnson administration. And that is the whole point. You are absolutely right there, Steve, as Palm and I were talking about. It's actually extremely malodorous that the commissioner or the chief constable, wherever you happen to live, Thames Valley Police or West Mercia Police or Warwickshire Police with relation to Kieran, who was on the other night, if the chief constable can just announce on TV that they're investigating you, oh, don't worry, it's not for a crime, we're just investigating you. Well, then what the hell is up with that? You're absolutely right. It's designed to be prejudicial to the Prime Minister, and that's why it's going to stagger on until 3 weeks before Election Day, because in that sense it is very American. Keep your emails and tweets coming. We've got Stump the Stein coming up. It seems like only yesterday we were all on our doorsteps clanging our pots and pans for those plucky healthcare workers. You remember the slogans, we need to stay home because they can't? Oh, what's that? You don't remember it? Well, political needs change, and now all those plucky heroes are supposed to stay home. The unsung heroes of the pandemic are now the pariahs, being sung out the hospital door to the strains of, oh, now go, walk out the door, just turn around now, you're not welcome anymore. as Gloria Gaynor would put it. If you thought the fetishization of the healthcare system was a little weird and psychologically unhealthy, well, firing a big bunch of them at a time of record-breaking waiting lists. There are 6 million people waiting to see a doctor, and they're laying off doctors. We have a huge amount of non-COVID excess deaths. So laying off people who can prevent death, if you get to see them in time, is even weirder, from hero to zero. These healthcare workers are facing dismissal if they don't get the jabs, 2, 3, 4, however many they have in mind. But a group of them are now taking the NHS to court, saying the vaccine mandate goes against their fundamental human right of bodily autonomy. With me now is Rosalind Wilson, who is a nurse and a midwife and a plaintiff in this suit. It is great to see you, Rosalind. You're going to be losing your job if this thing goes through. What made you decide to actually take this and get a legal ruling on it?
A friend of mine had asked me to join a group that was forming in our hospital. We all work as midwives. She knew my stand on the NHS mandate, and we didn't realise that there was a group of us that were wanting to stand together. So the group got formed, and as we've been supporting each other, we realised that we needed to join in with the progression of the mandate and its takeoff. And one of the progression was to produce a claimant, to produce a legal claimant. And there was 8 options. And one of the options was for a black ethnic person to be one of the claimants against the case. And obviously, myself being a black Caribbean, I opted to be able to represent the black nursing midwifery staff. So that's why I chose to launch to be a complainant.
So the idea is that you represent all. There's representatives of all kind of different factions, demographic groups. Because I noticed that in the petition, they actually identify you, I think, as British West Indian or British Caribbean or whatever it is. So they were trying to get a broad range of people. Why is it half the people watching this will be saying, what's the big deal? Why don't you just get a couple of shots of the Pfizer and you can keep your job? And what's your response to people who say that?
It's because we shouldn't be forced to take something that we don't need to have. We should have bodily autonomy. We should be able to choose whether we want to have the vaccination or not. We shouldn't be forced to take it in order to, in this case, keep our jobs. If there wasn't an alternative way of actually treating COVID, there's lots of ways of being able to come against COVID, which includes vitamin C, vitamin D, zinc, supplements, a healthy diet, and that should be sufficient for a healthy adult. And the vaccination isn't required if you've already caught the disease and you've already built up your own immunity. That is sufficient to be able to fight it against if you come against COVID or exposed to COVID again. Particularly if you're a healthy adult or a young person or a teenager or certainly a child, your immunity is strong enough to fight against the virus.
Yeah. Now, you've said in this statement of claim that you and your fellow plaintiffs have brought, you've said that the government has failed to make the case as to why the vaccine is essential. So essentially, as you've said, there's lots of other things you can do. You can take zinc, vitamin C, vitamin D, a lot of things that are very easy. And then there's people who just don't need it at all, like children. And there's people who should think very strongly about getting one of these vaccines, particularly if they're men, young men, 20s and 30s and so forth. Do you think the government is going to be able to mount a serious defence of their position? Because they haven't bothered to do so far.
The government has just been talking on the same mantra. They haven't presented. They've just presented one case. They've just been mentioning on that the vaccine is safe, but they haven't produced or provided statistics or audits or research to prove or to confirm that the vaccine is safe. There aren't any statistics. We know that this vaccination is an experiment, and essentially whoever takes it is part of the experiment, because we now see that there are adverse reactions to the vaccination. These aren't being reported. There are actually deaths as a direct result of the vaccination. These haven't been reported. None of these have been actually reported on the mainstream media. It's just through social media that you get word of what is happening as a result of the vaccinations. I mean, you see and you watch different clips of young professional athletes who are in the middle of perhaps a practice game or in the middle of a football game and literally just keeling over, and you can just more or less see that it's as a result of the vaccination, the COVID vaccination that they've taken.
How do you think people are going to react to this? I mean, a lot of people do seem to be scared, and in particular, people who go to hospital seem to be scared. But you've worked, I take it you've worked throughout this whole 2 years of COVID. You've managed to protect yourself and you've managed to protect your patients. Are you frustrated that what you've been doing the last 2 years is now no longer good enough?
It's a slap in the face. Like you said at the beginning, we were deemed as heroes, and now they're ready to sack us because we're a risk to the patients, but a risk to ourselves and to whoever we work with. So it is very frustrating that we can put our lives on the line with very limited PPE, with insufficient staff, being exposed to a virus that we weren't sure at the very start how to treat. But every night we were just... Every shift we were being exposed to the virus, and as I said, with limited PPE, with not much resources, we just got on with it. We just supported each other, and now as time has moved on, we're told that unless you get the vaccination, you're no longer worthy of. You can't serve the patients, you can't serve the NHS. You're not required. You're not needed. So yeah.
Well, it's nothing to do with the medicine, it's nothing to do with the science. This is bureaucratic box checking, almost absurd bureaucratic box checking. And with 6 million people on the waiting list, it seems the perfect time to lay off just shy of 100,000 NHS staff. So, Roslyn, I wish you the best of luck with this case, because when the government imposes extraordinary measures, it has a duty to provide the evidence that justifies those measures. So we're going to be following your case. Thank you, Roslyn. The Steyn will be right along. Ask me anything you'd like. GBViews at gbnews.uk. And singer-songwriter Andy Kim is up next to rock you gently. Don't touch that dial.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
It's the end of the week, and I thought I'd put a little music on the dance set and boogie around the parlour, and then I read a big report on how new songs account for a smaller percentage of the music biz than in the entire 140 years or so of commercial pop music. Something like 70% of the money is now in the back catalogue, in hits from the 60s, 70s and 80s. My next guest knows a bit about that. He gave us the biggest hit, a global blockbuster of 1969. Here's the group. See if you can spot which one he is. We had no audio there. I should have sung along. Honey, do. Oh, sugar, sugar. You are my candy girl, and you got me wanting you. And then in the 70s, after extensive cosmetic surgery to lose that Saturday morning cartoon look, he had another global blockbuster smash. And for some reason we got no audio there. Rock me gently, rock me slowly, take it easy. Don't you know that I have never been loved like this before? That's what Andy Kim would have been singing there if we'd heard him. And that was #1 in America, #1 in Canada, but only #2 in the United Kingdom. It was kept off the top by John Denver and Annie's song, which is basically criminal. I don't know how something like that is allowed to happen, but it's a great pleasure to welcome singer-songwriter Andy Kim. And Andy, just before we get on to Sugar Sugar and all that kind of stuff, what do you make of this report that new music, new songs are a smaller part of the music business than they have ever been, and it's basically just the back catalogue keeping the whole racket afloat now? Does that surprise you?
Somewhat. I just always felt that the kind of music that I wrote was the kind of feelings that I had, and so when you think about Sugar Sugar, you figure that you feel good just listening to it. There isn't a time in the past, 50 some odd years that whether you're 5 or 105, you know that song. I have no idea how that happened, but I am so grateful because it makes people feel good. Now, Rock Me Gently is another one that kind of, when I wrote that song as well, and I ended up producing it, and nobody wanted to put the record out, I put it out on my own, and eventually partnered with EMI Capital to put the record out globally. I think the songs of yesterday are songs of
feelings more than anything else. We're not trying to make a statement. Yes, there's Bob Dylan, and there are some others, but basically, you ain't gonna get better than Bob Dylan. But a lot of us, whether it's Annie's song, Tender and Loving, I have no problem with him being number one and my being number two. It wasn't about the numbers. It was just about the fact that I was a kid that grew up in Montreal, Canada, and had a dream, and was able to go to New York and have all the success. So I'm a lucky guy.
Yeah, you lived the dream because you headed south from Montreal and wound up at the Brill Building. And the interesting thing, just to stick with that line of thought, Sugar Sugar, if you were like a Bob Dylan type, Sugar Sugar was like the quintessential manufactured pop song for a manufactured pop group. Don Kirshner had started the Monkees, who were like the original bubblegum group, and he's having all these hit records. And then suddenly one day the Monkees come in and say to him, we need to be taken seriously as great artists. And he thinks, oh my God, here it goes. The jig's up. And so he thinks the way to avoid that happening next time is to pick a group that doesn't actually have any corporeal existence. So he picks Archie and Reggie and Betty and Veronica and the Archies. So it's as manufactured and fake and cynical as it can get on Don Kirshner's part. And yet at the same time, you wrote a very genuine song that people love.
Well, I always felt that no one has the responsibility to like what you do. And I never thought that Sugar Sugar was anything other than a sweet love song. Here's, if you will allow me, could you tell me what the first lyric of the first verse is, Mark? You know Sugar Sugar, obviously, the chorus. But the first
honey, sugar, sugar. You're my candy. It's not the... honey, oh sugar, sugar, you are my candy girl, and you got me wanting. What is it? I can't believe the loveliness of loving you. Is that it? That's a great line, by the way.
Yes, you're right. I just can't believe the loveliness of loving you. I just can't believe it's true.
Oh, that's great.
I just can't believe of the wonder that I'm feeling. So, what's great is that Sugar Sugar, whether it was the Archies, Tina Turner recorded it, Bob Marley recorded it, Wilson Pickett had a million seller in the R&B charts. Here's what I don't understand. I don't understand what happens after you write a song and it's out into the world. I'm not in control of that. So I count my lucky blessings that I lived a life filled with music, and I don't have to stand in line for anything. So it's pretty cool life,
Yeah, no, that's true. And often sometimes a great song, once it's written and it's out there, you think, why did nobody think of that before? And Rock Me Gently is a bit like that, I think. Rock me gently, rock me slowly. You think, that's actually a good idea for a song. Why did nobody think of it 20 years earlier? It's like a truffle in the woods, and you're the first guy to get to it.
Well, I just think that to me, songwriting is a gift that comes to you. Basically, I don't sit around thinking, oh, rock me gently. So now how do I finish that? It just comes to you. It's like Sugar Sugar came, that chorus came immediately. So I don't think you can really teach someone to write. You can teach someone to write music. You can teach them how to write songs, but I don't think you can teach them to write hit records. That's the charge of the audience. That's the charge of the people that need to hear something. Just as an example, when Sugar Sugar was released in May of 1969, nobody wanted to play it in the U.S. because everybody needed to be real, write better songs, except one radio station in San Francisco started playing it in July. And in September, it dislodged Honky Tonk Woman from the Stones for 4 weeks. So I'm no hero here. I was lucky enough that it came to me, and I was lucky enough to get on the ride, to be honest with you.
Yeah. It's a phenomenon in a way, just to go back to what we were saying about the music biz being dependent on old songs now. It's a phenomenon on a scale that contemporary songs, it's very difficult to reach, which is why you still hear it on all these oldies stations. I mean, they didn't have oldies stations in healthier times. In the 1940s, there weren't stations playing wax cylinders from the 1890s 24 hours a day. Something has slightly changed. And I was thinking about that with your Christmas song, because you wrote I think about 15 years ago, something like that. You wrote a Christmas song called Whatever Happened to Christmas. Whatever happened to me and you, and it's a very touching idea for a song. And there you are. Yeah, we've got you, and I think it's Ron Six. Well, I know that's Yonge Street in Toronto, and you're busking there.
Yes.
And you're not busking because you need to be busking on the street, because, as you said, you've still got a great income stream from your hits, so people don't really need to throw quarters into your guitar case, although they're putting a lot in there. But what's it like when you actually say, okay, we're going to write a Christmas song? What hasn't been written about? Santa Claus is coming to town. With then one foggy Christmas Eve, Santa came to say, Rudolph with you. I'm dreaming of a white snow, Santa. I mean, it's a difficult thing, isn't it, in 2006 to sit down and write a Christmas song with something new to say?
Well, I just, by the way, that was Ron Sexsmith that was with me. And we wrote that song together. I had come to him with the idea, and we had become great friends, and there's no better way to hang with a friend than to write a song.
No.
Look, it's not by science. It's really not. Songwriting for me is not. It's not science. It's just accepting the God's angels that come and give you something, and with a small G and a small A. Because I really believe that songwriters sometimes are intuitive. I mean, when I hear songs like MacArthur Park, and I'm amazed. I'm amazed that a song was created that way. I don't write those songs. I write Sugar Sugar, Rock Me Gently, and do that kind of stuff. So.
No. Well, that's a brilliant point. No one goes around thinking someone left the cake out in the rain. That'd be a great idea. I'll make $20 million if I put that in a song. You can't do it like that. Andy Kim, thank you very much for joining us, and carry on rocking gently, because you've given a lot of happiness to millions of people around the world. That'll do it for us. Have a spiffy weekend. The one and only Alistair Stewart is up next. Stay safe, stay free.
Hello, we've got some stormy weather to come across the northern half of the UK this weekend. A very windy picture through Saturday. Some spells of rain to come at times too, with the quietest of the weather towards the south. That's because this area of high pressure is sliding away. We've got an area of low pressure been named Storm Malik by the Danish Met Service, giving some very strong winds. But yet another system then piling in for Sunday. A lot of cloud in the sky overnight tonight. Temperatures, if anything, rising a little bit through the night with all that cloud around. But it's across western Scotland where we'll see the rain piling in, turning heavy and